The millionaire shaved her hair out of revenge, but he didn't know that everything would come back to him. If this story interests you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us from which city you are watching us. We continue. Helena walked down the mirrored hallway on the 42nd floor as discreetly as ever, her footsteps silent against the navy blue carpet that covered the Tech Solutions floor. Her slender fingers held a folder with financial reports that needed the CEO's signature before closing for the day. As an administrative assistant for 5 years, she knew every detail of that meticulously calculated routine. The reflection in the windows followed her, impeccable grey blazer, brown hair tied in a severe bun, discreetly framed glasses, an almost invisible presence, exactly as Daniel Montenegro, the company's billionaire founder, preferred his employees to be. Especially her, who had access to privileged information and moved between the building's most important meeting rooms. Upon arriving at the presidential antechamber, Helena unconsciously straightened her posture. Marina, the executive secretary, waved briefly without taking her eyes off the computer screen. "Come in, he's waiting for you," she said with her usual formality. Helena took a deep breath and knocked twice on the door before turning the handle. Daniel. Montenegro's office was a masterpiece of minimalist design. Spotless white walls, grey and black furniture, and a panoramic view of the capital that made one feel dwarfed by the city's grandeur. The CEO was standing by the window, talking on the phone in English to some international investor. His tailored, Italian suit and platinum watch on his wrist were just details of the empire he had built at the age of 35. "Leave the reports on the table," he ordered without turning around, briefly interrupting the call. Helena obeyed and was already heading for the door when his voice stopped her. "Wait, I need you to organize the company's 10th anniversary party for next month. I want something discreet, elegant, nothing excessive." "Yes, sir. I will begin. Preparations immediately," Helena replied, making mental notes. Daniel finally turned around, his calculating green eyes studying her for a moment. "How long have you worked here?" he asked, as if he didn't know exactly every detail about his employees. 5 years, sir." 5 years, he repeated, an enigmatic half-smile on his lips. "And in all that time you've never made a single mistake. Impressive." The comment sounded more like a warning than a compliment. In the days that followed, Helena immersed herself in organizing the event. Every detail was meticulously planned. The most exclusive buffet in the city, minimalist decor in shades of silver and blue, sophisticated background music. The guest list included the biggest names in the country's financial and technology markets. During planning meetings, she noticed the sidelong glances that Ricardo Montenegro, Daniel's younger brother and the company's CFO, would give her. Unlike his brother, Ricardo had a more discreet presence, kind eyes behind his glasses and an air of genuine concern for the well-being of employees. One afternoon, while she was reviewing the final details of the event at her desk, Helena received an unusual email. It was from Sofia Martinez, a renowned photographer who had captured important moments in the feminist movement in the 1980s. The email contained just one sentence: "Sometimes silence is also a form of violence." Those words penetrated deep into Helena's consciousness, awakening something that had long been dormant. That night, when she arrived at her small apartment, she spent hours in front of the bathroom mirror, observing the woman she had become. The perfect employee, the efficient shadow, the voiceless presence. Her fingers touched the tight bun, slowly undoing it. Her brown hair fell in waves over her shoulders, and for the first time in years, Helena allowed herself to see beyond the professional mask she wore every day. In the back of her closet, she found a piece of clothing she had never worn to work, a discreet red dress, a gift from her sister for her last birthday. Holding her dress close to her body, Helena made a decision that would change not only her life, but the lives of many others. For the company anniversary party, she would be more than just a number on a spreadsheet. She would be Helena, simply Helena. Little did she know that this seemingly simple choice would set off a chain of events that no one could have foreseen. The Ballroom at the unique hotel was ablaze with soft light from crystal chandeliers. The corporate elite circulated among champagne glasses and calculated smiles, celebrating Tech Solutions' 10th anniversary. Helena arrived discreetly, as she always did, but something was different that night. The red dress hugged her curves with restrained elegance. Her brown hair fell in soft waves over her shoulders, and light makeup highlighted her delicate features. Some of her co-workers had to look twice to recognize her. Marina, the executive secretary, widened her eyes and whispered a genuinely surprised, "Wow." "Helena? Is that really you?" asked Carlos, one of the senior developers, approaching with an admiring smile. "I never imagined— you look stunning." She thanked him with a shy smile, feeling simultaneously exposed and liberated. For the first time in years, she wasn't just the efficient assistant. She was a woman who took her place with dignity. Ricardo Montenegro watched her from across the room, his eyes conveying a mixture of admiration and concern. He started to walk toward her, but was intercepted by a group of investors. Even so, he didn't stop himself from casting occasional glances in her direction. The celebration was underway when Daniel Montenegro took the small stage for his speech. Dressed in an impeccable black Armani suit, he exuded his usual aura of power and control. His green eyes roamed the room as he spoke about innovation, the future, and success, until his gaze found Helena. For a moment, almost imperceptible to most of those present, his expression stiffened. The rehearsed smile faltered for a fraction of a second, and his hands tightened slightly on the microphone. Helena felt a shiver run down her spine as she noticed the subtle change in the CEO's expression. After the speech, Daniel walked around, the room greeting important guests with his usual diplomacy, but Helena could feel his eyes following her, like a predator studying its prey. When he finally approached, his smile didn't reach his eyes. "Interesting choice of attire, Helena," he commented quietly just so she could hear. "I didn't know you liked attention so much." "It's just a dress, Mr. Montenegro," she replied, keeping her voice steady despite her growing nervousness. "Nothing is ever just anything in this company. You should know that after all this." "Time?" he snapped, his seemingly cordial tone masking a veiled threat. "Tomorrow I want you at my penthouse at 8 miles sharp. We have important matters to discuss." Before Helena could respond, Ricardo approached, as if he had sensed the tension in the air. "The party is wonderful, Helena. You did an exceptional job organizing it," he praised, subtly positioning himself between her and his brother. Daniel gave his brother a cold look before walking away to greet other guests. Ricardo turned to Helena, his expression filled with genuine concern. "Are you okay?" "I am," she replied automatically, even though her heart was racing. "I'm just tired from organizing the event." But they both knew it wasn't true. Something had changed irreversibly that night. The air in the room seemed heavier, and the background music sounded distant, as if Helena was submerged in deep water. On the way home, as the taxi wound its way through the empty streets of the capital, Helena relived every moment of the night. Daniel's gaze, the barely concealed tension, the summons for the following morning. Her reflection in the car window showed a different woman from the one who had hidden for years behind dull suits and severe buns. In her apartment, sitting on the edge of her bed, still wearing her red dress, Helena picked up her phone and on impulse researched more about Sofia Martinez, the photographer who had sent her that enigmatic email. The images she found kept her awake until dawn, powerful portraits of women who had dared to challenge the silence imposed by society. When the sun began to rise, painting the capital's sky with shades of pink and orange, Helena had already made her decision. She would go to meet Daniel Montenegro, but not as the submissive employee he had expected to find. The red dress had been just the beginning of her transformation. The private elevator that led to the Tech Solutions penthouse seemed slower than usual that morning. Helena stared at her reflection in the mirrored walls, wearing her usual grey business suit, her hair still loose in soft waves, a small silent resistance she decided to maintain. The entire floor had been transformed into Daniel Montenegro's private retreat. The receptionist was not at her usual post, and an uneasy silence hung in the air. Helena walked down the hallway, her heels clicking on the Italian marble floor, until she reached the imposing double doors of the main office. Before he could knock, Daniel's voice rang out from inside. "Come in!" He was sitting in his black leather chair, his back to the door, gazing out at the city below. The morning sun cast a golden outline around his silhouette, almost like an invisible crown. "Close the door," he ordered without turning around. "Helena." "Go," obeyed, feeling her heart race. "Do you know why you're here?" "You mentioned that we had important matters to discuss," she replied, keeping her voice steady. Daniel swiveled slowly in his chair, his green eyes fixed on her with disturbing intensity. On his desk lay an open folder. Her personal file, Helena realized. 5 years of impeccable work, he began, leafing through the documents. Absolute dedication. Exemplary. Discretion. And then he stood, striding around the table with deliberate movements. "And then you decide to do that yesterday. Show up like that. Draw attention. Create a buzz in the halls." His voice remained controlled, but there was a latent threat in every word. "Mr. Montenegro, it was just a dress for a festive occasion," Helena tried to argue, but was interrupted by a dry laugh. "Just a dress? No, Helena. It was a statement. An affront. An attempt to subvert the natural order of things." He stopped a few feet away from her. "Do you know how many people have tried to defy me over the years? They've all learned there are consequences." At that moment, the office door opened without warning. Ricardo Montenegro walked in, stopping abruptly when he noticed the tension in the room. "Dan, we need to discuss the numbers for the last quarter. Oh, sorry, I didn't realize you were in a meeting." "Get out, Ricardo," Daniel ordered, without taking his eyes off Helena. "Actually, it's urgent," Ricardo insisted, his gaze shifting between Helena and his brother. "The investors are waiting on the line." Daniel clenched his fists, visibly annoyed by the interruption. "Wait here," he ordered Helena, before following his brother out of the office. Alone, Helena allowed herself to take a deep breath. Her eyes scanned the room, stopping at a framed photograph on the wall. Daniel next to several important figures from the business world, all men, all with the same rehearsed smile of superiority. Minutes later, the door opened again. Daniel returned alone, carrying something in his hands that made Helena's blood run cold, a pair of professional hairdressing scissors. "Sit down," he ordered, indicating a chair strategically positioned in front of a full-length mirror that Helena hadn't noticed before. "What are you going to do?" she asked, her voice betraying a slight tremor. "I'm going to teach you a lesson about hierarchy and respect," he replied, his voice dangerously calm. "Sit down." Helena looked at the door, considering running away, but she knew that would only make her situation worse. With her legs shaking, she sat down. The reflection in the mirror showed a woman who, despite her fear, maintained dignity in her gaze. Daniel stepped behind her, the scissors glinting in the morning light. "Did you want to draw attention to yourself with your hair yesterday? Great. Let's see how you feel without it." The first cut was brutal, ripping out an entire lock of brown hair that fell silently to the marble floor. Helena did not scream, did not beg. Her eyes remained fixed on the mirror, meeting Daniel's in the reflection, as he methodically destroyed what she considered a fundamental part of her identity. Down below, in the city that followed its frenetic rhythm, no one could imagine the scene that was unfolding at the top of that glass and steel skyscraper. No one except Ricardo Montenegro, who watched through the crack in the door, his face contorted in an expression of horror and helplessness, while silently documenting on his cell phone every moment of that veiled violence. The clock read 9:47 when Helena left the Tech Solutions building. The winter sun wasn't warm enough to ease the cold inside her. Her steps were steady, even though her entire world seemed to be falling apart. Her shaved head drew curious glances from passers-by, but she kept her chin up, refusing to show weakness. In her apartment, Helena stood for hours in front of the bathroom mirror, touching the smooth surface of her skull. Each stroke of her fingers trembled over the exposed skin, but there were no tears in her eyes. Instead of crying, A growing determination began to take shape in her chest. The phone rang several times, calls from Ricardo Montenegro that she chose not to answer. A few text messages arrived. "We need to talk." "I can help." "What?" "He did is unacceptable." Helena read them but did not respond. At that moment she needed to be alone with her thoughts. Sitting on the floor of her bedroom, surrounded by strands of hair she had collected from the roof in a last act of dignity, Helena opened her laptop. Her hands flew over the keyboard, typing an email to Sofia Martinez. "Your words about silence as a form of violence resonated with me in a way you could not imagine. Today, I experienced firsthand the price of daring to exist. I need to talk. To you." The reply arrived surprisingly quickly. "Come meet me on the coast, here far from the skyscrapers. We will learn together to transform pain into art. I enclose the address." Helena spent the night organizing her life. She transferred her savings to a new bank account, cancelled her credit cards, and packed only the essentials in a small suitcase. In the process, she found an old camera that she had bought on impulse years ago and had never used. She put it in her suitcase, feeling that this object would play an important role in her new life. The next morning, before the sun even rose, he left an envelope at the entrance of his building, addressed to Tech Solutions, his resignation letter, succinct and professional, without mentioning the events of the previous day. Along with it, he returned his badge and his company cell phone. On her way to the bus station, she passed a scarf shop. She stopped, looking at her reflection in the window. The scarf she had chosen was not for hiding. It was emerald green, vibrant, a silent statement that her transformation would not be dictated by shame. On the bus to the coast, Helena sat by the window and watched the capital's urban landscape gradually transform into greenery and sea. She took out of her pocket the business card that Sophia had attached to the email, an address on a street near the historic center, with a handwritten note. "Art is born when we decide to transform our pain into light." Her personal cell phone vibrated with a new message from Ricardo. "I have proof of what happened. When you're ready to use it, let me know." Helena looked at the screen for a long time before turning off the device. That proof would be important, but not now. First, she needed to rebuild herself. In her bag, the old camera seemed to pulse with possibilities. Helena held it, feeling its weight, its presence. Through the bus window, she began to mentally frame the scenes that passed by. A lady with a colorful umbrella waiting at the bus stop. Two girls laughing as they rode their bikes. An elderly couple walking hand in hand. It was as if for the first time he was truly seeing the world, no longer through the spreadsheets and reports that had dominated his life for so long, but through a gaze that sought beauty even in the simplest moments. The Yao bus continued on its way along the winding highway, and with each kilometer traveled, Helena felt the bonds of her old life loosening. The green scarf fluttered gently in the wind that came through the window, like a flag of liberation. In her pocket was a small notebook where she began to jot down ideas for a project that was beginning to take shape in her mind. At the top of the first page, she wrote in firm handwriting, "Truth in Images, Portraits of Silence." Below, a list of women who, like her, carried stories of resistance that needed to be told. The coast welcomed Helena with its cobblestone streets and colonial mansions painted in pastel colors. The salty sea air mixed with the aroma of coffee that escaped from the small cafes in the historic center. Following Sophia's instructions, she walked to a light blue house in the quietest part of the city, where the noise of tourists no longer reached. Sofia Martinez's home was a universe of its own. The walls were covered in black and white photographs, the key faces of women from different eras, each telling a silent story through their gaze. In the backyard, a profusion of orchids grew wild, creating an almost mystical setting. "You're here," a strong, welcoming voice said. Sophia stood in the back doorway, a woman in her early 60s with short grey hair and sharp eyes behind horn-rimmed glasses. Her smile was genuine, but her eyes took in every detail of Helena: the green scarf, the still rigid executive posture, the determined gaze. "Thank you for having me," Helena replied, feeling a mixture of nervousness and relief. "Come, let's have some coffee." Sophia led her to a porch covered in flowering vines. "And then you can tell me your story." Over the next few hours, Helena shared everything. The years of silent submission at Tech Solutions, the company anniversary party, the red dress, and finally, the brutal moment on the rooftop. Sophia listened intently, without interrupting, her eyes occasionally narrowing at specific moments in the narrative. "Do you know why I started taking pictures?" Sophia asked when Helena finished her story. Without waiting for an answer, she stood up and took an old album from a nearby shelf. "In 1985, I was a journalist. I covered mainly social events, high society weddings, corporate cocktail parties. One day, I photographed something I shouldn't have, an important businessman assaulting his secretary in an empty hallway." Sophia opened the album, showing a series of photographs yellowed with age. "When I tried to publish the story, I was silenced. I lost my job, I was threatened. But those photos showed me the power of the image, the truth that a photograph can reveal." Helena watched the images, feeling a deep connection to those women from the past. "How did you overcome it?" "I turned my anger into art. I began photographing women who, like me, had been silenced. I created an underground exhibition called Voices of Silence. At first there were only a few of us, but truth has a peculiar way of finding its way to the light." Standing up, Sophia walked over to an old trunk in the corner of the porch. From inside, she pulled out a vintage Hasselblad camera, perfectly preserved. "This camera has documented decades of female resistance. Now it's yours." "I can't accept it," Helena protested, but Sophia was already placing the camera in her hands. "It can, and it should. Your story doesn't end with what he did. In fact, that's where it begins. But first I need to teach you to see the world through that lens." In the weeks that followed, Helena immersed herself in an intense learning experience. Sophia taught her not only photographic techniques, but a new way of seeing reality. They walked together through the cobblestone streets, photographing market vendors, artisans, fisherwomen, women whose stories of resistance were etched in every wrinkle, every smile. "Photography is not about capturing beauty," Sophia explained, as she adjusted the camera's focus on Helena. "It's about revealing the truth, even when that truth is uncomfortable." One afternoon, while they were developing photos in the small laboratory that Sophia kept in the back of the house, Helena received a message from Ricardo. "The press is starting to ask questions about your disappearance. Daniel is nervous. I need to tell you something important." Helena showed the message to Sophia, who studied it for a moment before saying, "Sometimes we need unexpected allies, but first, you must be strong enough to weather the storm ahead." That night, sitting on the porch as she organized her first photographs, Helena began writing in her diary. "The truth doesn't have to scream to be heard. Sometimes it just needs to be seen, and I've finally learned to see." The sea breeze stirred the orchids in the garden, and Helena's green scarf danced softly. Her reflection in the window showed a different woman than the one who had arrived weeks ago. Stronger, more present, more real. The metamorphosis was just beginning. 3 months passed like a breeze on the coast. Helena's small room in Sophia's house had been transformed into a creative sanctuary, with photographs drying on makeshift clotheslines and notes covering the walls. Her project, Truth in Images, was beginning to take concrete shape. One morning, while they were having coffee on the balcony, Sophia made an announcement that took Helena by surprise. "I have secured a space at Galleria Tempo for your first exhibition in the capital." Helena nearly dropped her cup. "Capital? I don't know if I'm ready to go back." "You're more than ready," Sophia stated, her eyes shining with determination. "Besides, sometimes we need to face our demons on their own turf." The news coincided with a new message from Ricardo Montenegro. "Daniel is unstable. Several employees have started to resign in recent months. There are rumors circulating. I need to show you something." Helena agreed to meet Ricardo at a discreet cafe 2 days before the exhibition opened. He looked thinner, more worried, carrying a thick briefcase under his arm. "I've spent the last few months gathering evidence," he explained, opening the folder. Harassment records, non-disclosure agreements, documents proving a pattern of abusive behavior. This is it. He slid his phone across the table, showing the video he'd recorded the day Daniel had shaved Helena's head. "Why are you helping me?" Helena asked, studying his face for any sign of hesitation. "Because I've seen it happen before, with our mother." The revelation hung heavy between them. She never had a chance to defend herself, you do. Galleria Tempo was a modernist space in the heart of the capital. On opening night, the white walls were covered with Helena's photographs, powerful portraits of women who had faced different forms of silencing. Each image was accompanied by a short story, transforming the exhibition into a mosaic of female resistance. The public began to arrive. Artists, journalists, curious onlookers. Helena, wearing an elegant black dress and her inseparable green scarf, moved around the space with a newfound confidence. Sophia remained nearby, like a silent guardian. In the center of the gallery, there was an empty space reserved for the last photograph, the one that would only be revealed at the end of the night. Buzz about the exhibition had already reached the ears of the alternative press, and a small team of independent documentary filmmakers were circulating the space, capturing reactions and comments. "He's coming," Ricardo warned discreetly, approaching. "Helena, Daniel found out about the exposure and is furious." "Let him come," Helena replied, her voice calm but firm. "Some truths need to be confronted in the light." As the night wore on, more and more people filled the gallery. The stories in the photographs began to circulate on social media, creating a wave of shares and comments. Women began to identify themselves, share their own experiences, and create connections. Then at 9 p.m. sharp, exactly as planned, Helena stepped onto a small platform. The hubbub of the gallery gradually died away into an expectant hush. It was the moment she had mentally rehearsed for months. "Tonight's last photograph is not just an image," she began, her clear, steady voice echoing through the space. "It is an invitation to look squarely at what they try to make us hide." The lights went out, except for a single spotlight that illuminated the empty wall. Helena made a sign, and a large photograph was revealed. Herself sitting in the chair on the roof of Tech Solutions, her reflection in the mirror capturing the exact moment Daniel Montenegro held the scissors over her head. A collective murmur went through the gallery when the photograph was revealed. The impact of the image was visceral. The contrast between the violence of the act and the dignity in Helena's gaze created a powerful narrative that no one could ignore. "This photograph," Helena continued, her voice gaining strength, "is not about me. It's about all of us who have been silenced, diminished, erased. It's about the power they think they have over us, and the power we really have when we decide to stand up." It was at this moment that the gallery door burst open. Daniel Montenegro walked in, his face contorted into a mask of controlled fury. Dressed in an impeccable suit, he looked out of place among the artists and intellectuals who crowded the space. "This is defamation," he roared, pointing at the photograph. "I will sue this gallery and everyone involved." Sophia stepped forward, standing next to Helena. "All the images here are true, Mr. Montenegro, documented, dated, and witnessed." The audience began to move, forming a circle around the scene. Cell phones were discreetly raised, capturing every moment. Daniel realized he was being filmed and tried to modulate his voice, but anger was evident in every word. "You signed a confidentiality agreement, Helena. This will have serious consequences." "The agreement does not cover acts of violence, Daniel," Ricardo's voice rang out clearly as he emerged from the crowd. "And we have proof that this was not an isolated incident." Daniel turned to his brother, betrayed. "You too? After everything we've built?" "We built on lies and fear," Ricardo replied, pulling a flash drive from his pocket. "Here is every document, every testimony, every piece of evidence of what you have done over the years. It is already in the hands of the press." A veteran. Journalist from the capital's Folha, who was covering the exhibition, approached with her tape recorder. "Mr. Montenegro, would you like to comment on the allegations of systematic harassment at your company?" Daniel stepped back, his veneer of control beginning to crack. His eyes scanned the gallery, finding not cowed faces, but steady, defiant gazes. On every wall, Helena's photographs seemed to watch him, each one telling a story of resistance. "You don't understand what you've done," he hissed at Helena. "I gave you a chance. I took you from nothing. I made you into someone." "No, Daniel," Helena replied, her voice calm but powerful. "You tried to make me into a nobody. But look around. Every woman in this room has a similar story, and now those stories can no longer be silenced." At that moment, a young executive from Tech Solutions, who was at the exhibition, stepped forward. "I have a story to tell, too," she announced, her voice shaking but determined. Another woman joined her, and another. Like a dam finally breaking, the stories began to flow. Women from different companies, different positions, all sharing similar experiences of harassment and silencing. Daniel Montenegro, the powerful CEO who built his empire on fear, seemed to shrink with each new report. His face alternated between red with anger and pale with worry. He looked around for his security guards, but they had remained outside, barred from entry by gallery policy. "This isn't going to happen," he threatened, backing toward the door. "You'll regret this." "No, Daniel," Helena replied, her voice echoing through the gallery. "The only regret here is that we didn't speak up sooner, but now our voice can no longer be silenced." As Daniel stormed out of the gallery, the silence that followed was broken by a wave of applause. Sophia hugged Helena, silent tears streaming down her wrinkled face. Ricardo squeezed his sister's hand, a simple gesture that held years of regret and redemption. The exhibition Truth in Images had become something bigger than a photography exhibition. It had become a catalyst, a turning point, a moment of collective awakening that no one there could ignore. The morning after the exhibition, Helena woke up to find her phone overflowing with notifications. The hashtag The Truth in Image was trending, and her photographs were circulating heavily on social media. The mainstream press was starting to pick up on the story, with headlines that highlighted not only the confrontation in the gallery, but the larger movement that was emerging. "You've created something extraordinary," Sophia said, pouring coffee in the kitchen of her apartment in the capital, where Helena was staying. "But now comes the hard part, sustaining the change." Helena's laptop was open on her desk, displaying dozens of emails from women wanting to share their stories. Some were high-ranking executives, others were entry-level employees, all connected by the common experience of silencing. "We need to give this structure," Helena reflected, organizing her thoughts in a notebook. Her safe space where these stories can be told and documented. Ricardo arrived shortly afterward, carrying the day's newspapers. "Tech Solutions is in crisis," he reported. "The board has called an emergency meeting. Several investors are threatening to withdraw their support." "And Daniel?" Helena asked, although she already imagined the answer. "He disappeared. His private jet took off for an undisclosed destination in the early hours of the morning, but he left his lawyers prepared for a war." Sophia, who had been silently observing the conversation, picked up her old camera and began photographing. The scene, Helena and Ricardo leaning over the newspapers, the morning light filtering through the window, creating a moment of intimacy and determination. "Every story needs to be documented," she said, lowering her camera, "not just with words but with pictures, pictures that show not just the pain but the strength." That afternoon, Helena received an unexpected call. It was Julia, a prominent curator at the museum. "Your exhibition needs to be seen by more people," she said. "We would like to bring it to the museum in an expanded version." The Few. News was exciting, but Helena had a bigger idea. What if instead of just my photos, we created a collaborative exhibition, a space where other women can tell their stories through art? The idea quickly took shape. With Sophia's help and Ricardo's discreet financial support, Helena began organizing photography workshops for women who wanted to document their own stories of resistance. The Truth in Images project grew into a growing movement. Website was created, with a virtual gallery where stories could be shared safely and securely. A team of volunteer lawyers offered to provide legal support to women who wanted to report cases of harassment. Psychologists joined the project, offering emotional support. "We need to institutionalize this," Ricardo suggested during a planning meeting. "Turn it into a formal organization, with structure and resources to grow." Helena agreed, but with one condition. It can't be hierarchical, like traditional corporate structures. It needs to be a network of mutual support, where all voices have equal weight. As the movement grew, corporate life was also changing. Other companies, fearing similar exposure, began to review their internal policies. Groups of female employees organized, demanding real changes in the power structures. One afternoon, while Helena was organizing the photos for the museum exhibition, she received an anonymous message: "Your courage changed my life." Attached was an audio file, a recording of a meeting where Daniel Montenegro, years earlier, had systematically humiliated his female employees. "Every piece of the puzzle helps tell the full story," noted Sophia, who was helping curate the project. "But the most important thing is not to expose the abusers, it's to show how women can be stronger together." Helena's transformation from invisible assistant to leader of a social movement was happening before everyone's eyes. But she maintained her essence, the same silent strength, now amplified by the union with other women who, like her, had decided it was time to be seen and heard. The museum exhibit was scheduled to open in 3 weeks, and Helena spent her days meeting with curators, taking photography workshops and mentoring women who were finding the courage to tell their stories. The movement had grown beyond her initial expectations, becoming a beacon of hope for many. One particularly busy afternoon, while organizing the last photographs for the exhibition, Helena received an unexpected visitor. Marina, her former colleague, from Tech Solutions, showed up at the space where the project was being set up. "Sorry to come unannounced," Marina said, her usual professionalism giving way to a palpable vulnerability. "But I need to show you something." She opened her bag and took out an old diary, its pages yellowed with age. "It belonged to my predecessor at Tech Solutions, Luisa Montenegro." Helena felt her heart race. Montenegro? She was Daniel. "And Ricardo's mother," Marina confirmed. "She was the company's executive secretary before me. I found this diary hidden in an archive that was being digitized." The two sat in a quiet corner of the space. The diary revealed a painfully familiar story. Luisa Montenegro had been systematically silenced by her husband, the original founder of the company, who used the same tactics of manipulation and control that Daniel would later replicate. "She tried to speak out several times," Marina explained, turning the pages carefully. "But back then, in the early 1990s, no one wanted to listen. She ended up being admitted to a rest clinic, supposedly for nervous problems." Helena photographed each page of the diary, her mind connecting the dots. Daniel's behavior wasn't just an individual distortion of power, it was an inherited pattern, a family scar he had weaponized. "Ricardo needs to see this," Helena decided, but Marina interrupted her. "He already knows. In fact, he was the one who asked me to bring the diary to you. He said that maybe it will help you understand why it took him so long to take a stand against his brother." That night, Helena couldn't sleep. Luisa Montenegro's words echoed in her mind, creating bridges between past and present. She got up and began working on a new series of photographs, this time exploring how patterns of abuse repeat themselves across generations when left unchallenged. Sophia, who was staying in the next room, found Helena working at dawn. "You haven't slept," she observed. "I needed to process this," Helena replied, showing the photos she had produced during the night. They were powerful compositions that juxtaposed excerpts from Luisa's diary with images of contemporary women, creating a visual dialogue between different eras of silencing. "This needs to be part of the exhibition," Sophia said, studying. "The images. It's the missing piece, the connection between the personal and the universal." Ricardo showed up later, carrying more documents from his mother's time. "I found these in my father's personal archives," he said, handing over a folder. "They are letters she wrote to various authorities and newspapers, denouncing what was happening. They were all ignored or returned." As they were examining the documents together, Helena's phone rang. It was her lawyer. Daniel Montenegro had been located on a private island in Greece, from where he was coordinating a smear campaign against the movement. "He's using bots and fake profiles to discredit the allegations," the lawyer explained. "He's trying to turn this into a war of narratives." Helena heard the news with surprising calm. "He still doesn't understand," she said, looking at the photographs she had produced during the night. "This isn't about him. It's about all of us, including his own mother." That afternoon, Helena called a meeting with her team. The material about Luisa Montenegro would be incorporated into the exhibition, but in a special way. An entire room would be dedicated to her memory and to the memory of other women who, decades before, had tried to break the silence. "Let's call this section Echoes of Silence," Helena proposed, "because sometimes we need to look to the past, to understand how we got here, and more importantly, where we want to go." Word about Luisa's diary began to circulate discreetly among the movement's participants. More women began to bring old records, diaries, letters, photographs of their mothers and grandmothers who had faced similar situations. The exhibition was becoming a living historical archive of women's resistance. The week leading up to the museum's opening was intense. The smear campaign orchestrated by Greece's Daniel Montenegro had gained momentum on social media, with false accusations and conspiracy theories trying to discredit the movement. But for every online attack, a new wave of real-life support emerged. "They don't understand that every attempt to silence us only amplifies our voice," Sophia observed, as she helped Helena finalize the arrangement of the photographs. The room dedicated to Luisa Montenegro had become the emotional heart of the exhibition, a powerful testament to the continuity of women's struggle across generations. On the morning of the inauguration, Helena received an anonymous email that made her heart stop for a moment. It was from a former employee of the exclusive spa, where Luisa Montenegro had been held in the 1990s. Attached to the email was a digitized audio file, an old recording in which Daniel's father explicitly admitted using his influence to keep his wife isolated. "This changes everything," Ricardo said after listening to the recording. His face was pale, his hands shaking slightly. "This wasn't just silencing. This was institutionalized kidnapping." Helena immediately assembled her legal team. The recording was enough evidence to reopen Luisa's case, even after so many years. More importantly, it established a clear pattern of abuse of power that spanned 2 generations of the Montenegro family. While the team worked on the legal aspects, Helena focused on the final preparations for the exhibition. The main room of the museum was transformed into a maze of stories and images, each photograph telling a different part of a larger narrative about power, silence, and resistance. The afternoon before the opening, as the finishing touches were being made, an elderly woman appeared at the gallery. Her name was Clara, and she had been a nurse at the spa where Luisa had been staying. "I came to bring you this," she said, handing Helena a yellowed envelope. Inside were old photographs of Luisa, clandestine images that Clara had taken to document the situation. "She asked me to keep it," Clara explained, her voice choked with emotion. "She said that one day someone would need to know the truth." The photographs were devastating in their simplicity. Luisa Montenegro, an elegant, educated woman, transformed into a prisoner of luxury in the name of mental health. In one image, she held a small notebook, the same diary that was now part of the exhibition. Helena worked through the night incorporating the new material into the exhibition. Clara's photographs were arranged in a sequence that directly engaged with contemporary images, creating a visual timeline of female resistance. On the morning of the inauguration, the country's main media outlets were already positioned at the entrance to the museum. The story of Luisa's diary had been leaked, and the connection to the current case of Daniel Montenegro created shocking headlines. Ricardo arrived early, carrying a briefcase with official documents. "The Board of Tech Solutions has called a special meeting," he said. "The evidence is too strong to ignore." Sophia, who had been watching the final preparations with an attentive gaze, called Helena to a quiet corner of the gallery. "Look," she said, showing her phone. The hashtag Dança Justiça por Luísa was trending, along with Dança a Verdade é Imagem. "It's not just about us anymore," Helena reflected, watching people begin to gather at the museum's entrance. "It's about all of them. All of us. Every woman who has ever been silenced and found a way to make her voice heard." The doors of the museum opened promptly at 10 a.m. The line of visitors stretched for blocks. Among them were dozens of women carrying their own diaries, photographs and stories, ready to share their experiences in the documentation space that had been created especially for this purpose. The exhibition at the museum became an unprecedented cultural phenomenon. In the first hours after the opening, social media was flooded with images and emotional testimonies from visitors. The room dedicated to Luísa Montenegro, in particular, provoked intense reactions. Women from different generations identified with this story of institutionalized silencing. Amidst the whirlwind of events, Helena received a surprising call. It was Andrea Montenegro, Daniel and Ricardo's younger sister, who had been estranged from the family for years and was living discreetly in Portugal. "I saw it all on the internet," Andrea said, her voice betraying years of pent-up emotion. "The photographs, Mom's diary. I'm going back to the country. I have more stories to tell." Helena arranged a private meeting with Andrea at the museum cafe. When the woman arrived, the resemblance to Luísa's old photographs was striking. The same deep-set eyes, the same elegant posture that hid an inner strength. "I was very young when it all happened," Andrea began, her hands tightly gripping a coffee cup. "But I remember every detail. How our father controlled every aspect of Mom's life, how Daniel absorbed that behavior from an early age." As Andrea spoke, Helena recorded the testimony with her Hasselblad. The camera captured not just words, but decades of pain and silent resistance written on the woman's face. "I ran away when I was 18, Andrea continued. "I couldn't stand to see history repeating itself, Daniel becoming more and more like our father. Ricardo tried to convince me to stay. He said we could change things from the inside, but I knew it was impossible. Some structures need to be completely dismantled in order to be rebuilt." Late in the afternoon, when the exhibition was closed to the public, Helena gathered her team to share Andrea's testimony. Sophia, who had developed a keen eye for the nuances of the stories they were documenting, noticed something important. "It's no coincidence that Daniel chose to shave his head," she noted, connecting the dots. "In Luísa's diary, there's a passage about how his father cut her hair as punishment for daring to wear an inappropriate dress to a company event." The revelation brought a heavy silence to the room. The pattern of abusive behavior was not just similar, it was an exact replica, a cycle of violence that had been perpetuated across generations. Ricardo, who was attending the meeting, seemed particularly affected by the information. "How did I not realize this before?" he muttered, more to himself than to the others. That night, after everyone had left, Helena remained in the museum, walking among the photographs. She stopped in front of the central image of the exhibition, herself, with her newly shaved head staring at her reflection on the roof of Tech Solutions. Next to it, an old photograph showed Luísa Montenegro in a frighteningly similar situation. Her phone buzzed with a notification. Daniel Montenegro had given his first interview since leaving the country. For a podcast known for promoting conservative views, he described the A Verdade é Imagem movement as a feminist conspiracy to destroy traditional values. But his words rang hollow in the face of the visual evidence that piled up on the museum's walls. Each photograph, each testimony, each historical document told a part of a larger truth that could no longer be denied. Helena began preparing a new series of workshops, this time focused specifically on how to identify and document patterns of abusive behavior in corporate environments. Demand was so high that they had to create a waiting list. "We are creating more than a historical archive," she explained during a meeting with educators interested in taking the project to schools and universities. "We are developing tools so that future generations can recognize and break these cycles before they become established." Andrea Montenegro became an active contributor to the project, offering a unique perspective on how patterns of abuse develop within family and business structures. Her presence added an extra layer of legitimacy to the movement, although she preferred to keep a low profile, working behind the scenes. The impact of the museum exhibition reverberated far beyond the museum. Companies across the country began to review their internal policies, pressured by female employees who now felt empowered to demand change. Tech Solutions, in particular, was undergoing a complete restructuring. The board has appointed a new CEO, Ricardo said during one of the photography workshops. Paula Mendes, an executive known for her work on gender equity and corporate transparency. The news was significant, but Helena knew that structural change required more than just new leadership. With the support of Sophia and a growing team of volunteers, she began developing a certification program for companies truly committed to transforming their organizational culture. It's not enough to have policies on paper, Helena explained during a presentation to executives interested in the program. We need real accountability mechanisms, consistent documentation and secure channels for reporting. The Truth in Images project was evolving rapidly. What had begun as a photography exhibition had become a multifaceted movement with ramifications in different sectors of society. Universities were requesting lectures, companies were seeking consultancy, and international organizations were showing interest in replicating the model. In the midst of this expansion, Helena received an unexpected invitation. The UN wanted her to present the project on a panel about social innovation and women's rights. The news came through a representative who had visited the exhibition and was impressed by the methodology developed. It's not just about reporting abuses, Helena explained during a preparatory meeting with UN staff. It's about creating her new visual language to document and prevent systematic silencing. Sophia, who had accompanied Helena through this new phase, noticed a subtle change in her former apprentice. The woman who had arrived on the coast months earlier, seeking refuge and replenishment, now moved with a quiet confidence that inspired others to find their own strength. The workshop program continued to grow, with a waiting list stretching for months. Women from different backgrounds shared their experiences, learning not only photography techniques, but also how to identify and document patterns of abusive behavior in their environments. Every photograph is a document, Helena taught. Every image tells a story that can help other women recognize similar situations in their own lives. One afternoon during one of the workshops, a young intern at a multinational company began to cry as she photographed her own reflection. "I never realized before," she said, "how I've been making myself smaller, erasing myself just so as not to bother anyone." That moment crystallized something Helena had been feeling for weeks. The project needed to go beyond documentation. It needed to create active spaces of transformation, where women could not only recognize patterns of silencing, but also develop practical tools to break them. With this in mind, she began to structure a new phase of the project, a permanent training center that would combine art, psychology, and advocacy. The space, which would be installed in an old mansion in the center of the capital, would offer not only photography workshops, but also legal support, psychological counseling, and professional mentoring. "We are creating more than a movement," Helena explained during an interview for a documentary about the project. "We are building a support network, a space where every woman can find the tools she needs to rewrite her own story." Helena's personal transformation was reflected in each new aspect of the project. The green scarf she had once worn to cover her shaved head was now a chosen symbol, not a necessity. She alternated between wearing it and not, depending on her mood, a freedom that symbolized all the others she had gained. The old mansion in the center of the capital pulsated with a unique energy. After months of renovation, the training and documentation center, A Verdade e Imagem, was finally ready for its inauguration. The space had been carefully planned to be more than a training center. It was a sanctuary of transformation. On the day of the inauguration, as she walked through the hallways making the final adjustments, Helena found Sophia discreetly photographing the preparations. The mentor, who was now a constant presence on the project, captured the behind-the-scenes moments that would soon become history. "You know what strikes me the most," Sophia said, lowering the camera. "How every space in this mansion tells a different story of the same struggle." It was true. The first floor housed a permanent gallery with historical photographs of the feminist movement, including a special room dedicated to Luisa Montenegro. The second floor had been transformed into classrooms and photography studios where workshops would take place. The third floor housed the legal and psychological support offices. The morning of the inauguration brought a surprise. Andrea Montenegro had organized a complete archive of her mother's personal documents, including never-before-released letters that Luisa had written during her time in hospital. "I found this in the attic of the beach house," Andrea explained, handing Helena an old box. "She managed to secretly send some letters through a nurse. They are powerful testimonies." Helena and her team spent the next few hours digitizing and organizing the material. The letters revealed not only Luisa's suffering, but also her lucidity and resilience. In one of them, written shortly before her death, she expressed a wish: "May other women find the voice that was denied to me." The inauguration ceremony was scheduled for 7 p.m. Journalists from various media outlets gathered at the entrance to the mansion, while a line of guests stretched down the street. Among them were executives, artists, activists, and above all, ordinary women who had found the courage to tell their own stories. Paula Mendez, the new CEO of Tech Solutions, arrived quietly through the back door as planned. Her presence was significant. It symbolized not just change at the company, but a concrete commitment to transformation. Under her leadership, Tech Solutions had become the first major corporation to implement the certification program developed by Helena. "We are rewriting not just policies," Paula said during her brief speech, "but corporate culture itself. And that starts with acknowledging the mistakes of the past." Ricardo Montenegro, who now devoted much of his time to the project, had prepared a special surprise for the inauguration. With the help of a team of documentary filmmakers, he had produced a short film that intertwined Luisa's story with the testimonies of contemporary women. "This film is dedicated to the memory of my mother," he announced, his voice breaking, "and to all the women who refused to remain silent." During the screening, Helena observed the audience's reactions. Silent tears ran down unfamiliar faces, hands clasped together in search of support, heads nodded in recognition. It was as if each person present could see themselves reflected in those stories. At the end of the evening, after the official speeches and presentations, Helena took to the small makeshift stage. Wearing an elegant green dress, the same color as the scarf that had become her symbol of resistance, she shared her vision for the future of the project. "This center is not just a physical space," she said. "It is a commitment to truth, transformation, and healing. Every photograph we take, every story we document, every woman we welcome is part of a larger change that we are building together." The most moving moment of the evening came when a young Tech Solutions employee took the stage. It was the same intern who had cried during one of the first workshops. Now she was presenting her own photo series, documenting her journey of self-discovery and empowerment. The success of the training center in the capital quickly exceeded even the most optimistic expectations. In just 3 months of operation, the waiting list for the Hawaii workshops had already stretched for more than a year, and requests for partnerships were arriving from different states in the country. Helena sat in her new office in the mansion, analyzing expansion proposals with Sophia and Ricardo. The walls around her were covered with photographs, not just hers, but also work produced by workshop participants. Each image told a story of transformation. "We need to think in terms of scale without losing our essence," Helena pondered, as she reviewed a partnership request from a university. "Each new center needs to maintain the same commitment to truth and hospitality." Sophia, who had just returned from a trip to Portugal, where she presented the project, shared her observations. "What we built here resonates with women from different cultures and backgrounds. It's universal." At that moment, Andrea Montenegro entered the room, carrying her laptop. "You have to see this," she said, placing the computer on the table. It was a report from an important international newspaper about Daniel Montenegro, the former CEO of Tech Solutions, who had remained in Greece trying to rebuild his image, was now facing legal troubles there. Employees of his new startup had filed similar allegations to those that emerged in the country. Some patterns are hard to break, Ricardo commented, reading the report, but now women have tools to identify and combat them. The work developed. At the Center had, in fact, created a new paradigm for documenting and addressing corporate harassment. The certification program, initially developed for Tech Solutions, was being adapted and implemented by companies in different sectors. One afternoon, while leading a workshop for high-ranking executives, Helena received news that left her particularly emotional. Clara, the former nurse who had kept Luisa Montenegro's photographs, would be honored at a special event for her role in preserving memory and truth. "I never imagined that those photos I took in secret would have such an impact," Clara said during preparations for the tribute. "I just knew I couldn't let that story get lost." The project continued to evolve in new directions. A team of researchers had formed to study the impact of the program on participating organizations. Preliminary results were promising. Companies that implemented the certification program reported significant changes in their organizational culture. Helena spent more and more time mentoring new leaders, preparing them to take on increasing responsibilities in the project. "Our strength is in multiplication," she explained during training sessions. "Every woman we train becomes a new point of light in the network." The center had become a space of constant renewal and discovery. Resident artists developed new forms of visual documentation. Volunteer lawyers created educational materials on labor rights, and psychologists developed specific protocols for assisting women in situations of corporate harassment. One particularly successful initiative was the reverse mentoring program, where younger women shared their perspectives on technology and social media with more experienced professionals. This intergenerational exchange strengthened bonds within the movement and kept the project constantly updated. One spring morning, as she watched a group of participants working on their photography projects in the garden of the mansion, Helena reflected on her own journey. The reflection in the window showed a different woman from the administrative assistant who had once had her hair shaved off as punishment, not just externally but in her essence. 1 year after the inauguration of the training center, Helena was preparing for her presentation at the UN headquarters in New York. The project, Truth in Images, had been selected as an exemplary case of social transformation through art and activism. On the eve of her trip, during a final meeting with the team at the mansion, Helena received disturbing news. Daniel Montenegro had returned to the country. After his problems in Greece, he was planning an attempt to revive his public image through a series of lectures on conscious leadership and business transformation. "He's trying to rewrite the narrative," noted Andrea, who kept a close eye on her brother's activities. "He's hired a team of image consultants and is presenting himself as someone who has learned from his mistakes." Helena absorbed the information with a calm that surprised everyone. Years before, the news would have shaken her. Now it was just another chapter in the long story they were documenting. "We will continue our work," she declared during an emergency meeting with staff. "The truth does not need to be shouted to be heard. It is already in every photograph, in every story we document." The next day, as she was preparing to board a flight to New York, Helena received an unexpected message. It was from Mariana, the former receptionist at the Tech Solutions penthouse, who was present the day Daniel shaved his head. "He's organizing an event at the same hotel where the company party took place," Mariana wrote. "That night, with the red dress. It can't be a coincidence." The unique hotel, with its imposing ship-shaped architecture, had become an important symbol in the movement's narrative. It was there that Helena dared to make herself visible for the first time, wearing the red dress that triggered her entire transformation. "He's trying to recreate the scene in his own way," Sophia analyzed when Helena shared the information. "It's an attempt to regain control of the narrative." The center's staff mobilized quickly, not to confront Daniel directly, but to ensure that the truth continued to be documented and shared. a group of photographers was assigned to cover the event, capturing not only the official speech, but also the reactions and behind-the-scenes footage. Helena decided not to postpone her trip to New York. Her presentation at the UN was too important for the movement. Besides, as she explained to her team, our strength is not in one person, but in the network we create together. Before leaving, she organized a flash exhibition at the center. Life-size images were projected onto the walls of the mansion. The Tech Solutions hallway, the rooftop where her hair was shaved, the unique hotel on the night of the party. Every space that Daniel Montenegro had tried to transform into a scene of power and control was now reinterpreted through the lens of women who had learned to document their own truth. At the airport, while waiting for her flight, Helena received a series of photographs from Clara, the nurse who had cared for Luisa Montenegro. They were never before released images showing moments of silent resistance during her hospitalization. "I saved these for the right moment," Clara wrote. "Now, with Daniel back, maybe it's time to show that some patterns repeat themselves. But our resilience also grows stronger." Helena studied the photographs carefully. In one of them, Luisa Montenegro was seen sitting in her room at the clinic, writing in her diary. The reflection in the mirror captured an expression of determination that Helena recognized. It was the same look she had seen in her own reflection on the Tech Solutions penthouse. During the flight to New York, Helena worked on her presentation to the UN. It wasn't just a success story about a social project. It was a manifesto about how visual documentation can become a tool for transformation and healing. "Every photograph we take," she wrote in her notes, "is an act of resistance. Every story we document is proof that silence can be broken. And every woman who finds her voice through our lens is a reminder that the truth, once revealed, can no longer be erased." While Helena was presenting the project Truth in Images at the UN in New York, Daniel Montenegro was giving his first lecture at the unique hotel in the capital. The two events, taking place simultaneously on different continents, created a revealing contrast. In the UN auditorium, Helena shared not only numbers and results but real stories of transformation. Her presentation, interspersed with powerful photographs produced at the training center, provoked emotional reactions from the international audience. "Silence has many forms," she explained, projecting a series of images. "But truth also finds its way to light. Our mission is to create safe spaces where these truths can be documented and shared." Meanwhile, at the Hotel Unique, Daniel Montenegro was giving a speech about business renewal and humanized leadership. Wearing a light-colored suit and sporting a practiced smile, he tried to present himself as a man transformed by adversity. The team from the training center, strategically positioned at the event, documented every moment. The photographers trained by Helena captured not only the official speech, but also the revealing details. The way Daniel clenched his fists when questioned, the uncomfortable looks on the faces of former employees in the audience, the skeptical expressions of the journalists. Andrea Montenegro, who decided to attend her brother's event, sent Helena constant updates in New York. "It's surreal," she wrote. "He's using the same tactics as our father, the charismatic smile, the promises of change, the emotional manipulation." At the UN, Helena received these messages during breaks in her presentation. Instead of letting it shake her, she incorporated this parallel reality into her speech. "Resistance is not a one-time event," she explained to the international audience. "It is an ongoing process. As I speak to you here in the capital, the same system that tried to silence us is trying to reinvent itself. But now we have the tools to document that attempt." Social media quickly became a battleground of narratives. While Daniel's supporters shared edited excerpts of his talk, the center's staff released more complex and revealing footage. Ricardo Montenegro, who was monitoring everything from the training center, coordinated the strategic response. It was not about attacking his brother, but about ensuring that the truth remained visible and accessible. "Every attempt to rewrite history," he noted during an online meeting with staff, "is an opportunity to strengthen our documentation." In New York, after her presentation, Helena was approached by representatives of international organizations interested in replicating the training center model in their countries. The project had touched on something universal, the need to create safe spaces for silenced truths to emerge. At the end of that day, Sophia sent Helena a photograph that perfectly summed up the moment, a montage of the two talks happening simultaneously. On one side, Helena at the UN podium, sharing real stories of transformation. On the other, Daniel at the unique hotel trying to sell a manipulated version of reality. The images speak for themselves, Sophia wrote in the message accompanying the photograph. And that's why our work is so important. The evening ended with a video conference bringing together the entire center team. Spread across different locations, they shared their observations and planned the next steps. Daniel Montenegro's return, rather than weakening the movement, had served to reinforce its importance and urgency. Helena's return to the country was marked by a warm welcome at the training center. The mansion was decorated with photographs of the most memorable moments of her presentation at the UN, alongside images captured during Daniel Montenegro's lecture at the Hotel Unique. The contrast between the two narratives could not be more evident. "We have accomplished something extraordinary," Sophia said, hugging her former apprentice. "We have not only documented the truth, but we have created a movement that can no longer be ignored." The repercussions of the presentation at the UN were immediate. Organizations from several countries began to establish contact, interested in implementing similar programs. The model developed at the training center was about to become an international protocol for documenting and confronting corporate harassment. During a meeting with the center's expanded team, Helena shared the new perspectives that emerged after her trip. "We are not alone in this struggle," she explained. "In every country that has shown interest in the project, there are women with stories similar to ours, waiting for an opportunity to be heard." Meanwhile, Daniel Montenegro's attempt to rebuild his image faced unexpected obstacles. His lectures on humanized leadership were constantly confronted with documented evidence of his past behavior. The silent presence of the center's photographers at his events served as a constant reminder that the truth could no longer be so easily manipulated. Andrea Montenegro, who continued to monitor her brother's activities, noticed a change in his behavior. "He's losing control of the narrative," she observed during a video analysis session. "Every attempt to present himself as a changed man is contradicted by his own gestures, his expressions, his body language." The work at the center had created a new form of visual literacy. Women were not just learning to photograph, but to read and interpret images of power and control. This skill spread like a safety net, allowing abusive behavior to be identified and documented before it could take hold. One afternoon, while leading a workshop for a group of international executives, Helena received surprising news. Clara, Luisa Montenegro's former nurse, had found an additional diary, hidden between the pages of a recipe book. "It was the last one she wrote," Clara explained, handing the worn notebook to Helena. "In the last pages, there is a letter addressed to her children. She knew that one day the truth would come out." Louise's letter was a powerful testament not only to her own experience, but to her vision for the future. "My children," she had written, "by the time you read this, I hope the world will have changed enough for you to understand why I chose to resist, even in silence. Every word I write here is a seed of truth that will one day germinate." Helena organized a special session at the center for the public reading of the letter. Ricardo and Andrea were present, as were a select group of project participants. Luisa's voice, echoing through time, created a bridge between past and present, between pain and transformation. "Our mother would be the first to support this movement," Andrea said emotionally. "She would understand that every photograph we take, every story we document, is a way of honoring her resistance." The project's impact continued to spread in concentric waves. Companies that had initially resisted implementing the certification program now voluntarily sought it out, recognizing that transparency and fairness were not just moral issues but strategic ones as well. Paula Mendez, the CEO of Tech Solutions, had turned the company into an international case study in corporate cultural transformation. What happened here, she explained during a panel on women's leadership, wasn't just a policy shift. It was a revolution in how we document and confront power. At the end of that day, Helena went up to the terrace of the mansion, her favorite place for reflection. The sun was setting over the capital,